"If you play that song, I'll give you my car," shouted Tyler Blackstone, pointing to the red Tesla Model S Plaid parked a few yards away, as he mocked the black man sitting on the sidewalk on Bourbon Street in New Orleans. The car was worth more than $130,000. The beggar didn't bat an eye. William Carter, 45, had seen a lot during his 3 years living on the streets of New Orleans, but he never imagined that an ordinary Thursday would turn into the day that would change everything. His calloused fingers held a worn guitar that looked like it had survived a war, but still resonated with a purity that made tourists stop to listen. Tyler, 22, was the typical heir to a fortune built on questionable family businesses. His father controlled a chain of musical instrument stores that dominated the southern United States, and Tyler had never worked a single day in his life. Surrounded by 3 equally privileged friends, he gestured arrogantly, flaunting a Rolex that cost more than most people earned in a year. "Look at this guy," Tyler said, laughing loud enough for William to hear. "I bet he can't even read music properly. Wants to make easy money playing beggar's music." What Tyler didn't know was that William Carter wasn't on the streets because of a lack of ability or addiction. 3 years ago, he had lost everything in a single night: his career, his family, his reputation, due to a false accusation that destroyed his life in a matter of hours. But certain skills, once mastered, never completely disappear. "Pick a song, any song," Tyler continued, approaching with a cruel smile. "If you can play it right, you get my Tesla. But when you fail, promise me you'll never show up on this corner again to bother good people." William looked up for the first time, revealing a gaze that carried much more depth than anyone on the streets could imagine. "Any song?" he asked, his calm voice contrasting with Tyler's aggressive energy. "Any," Tyler repeated confidently. "But I'm going to choose something I know you'll never be able to play. How about Asturias by Albanese? The full version, without mistakes." The few street musicians nearby stopped what they were doing. Asturias was one of the most technically challenging pieces in the classical guitar repertoire, requiring years of formal study and perfect technique. It was a cruel choice for any musician, let alone someone apparently living on the streets. William smiled for the first time since the conversation began, a smile that carried secrets Tyler was about to discover in the most humiliating way possible. His fingers positioned themselves on the strings with a precision that made some observers frown, noticing something familiar in that movement. If you're starting to feel that this story goes beyond a simple bet between an arrogant heir and a beggar, you're right. Because what Tyler didn't know was that he had just challenged someone whose past was closely connected to the world he thought he ruled. The crowd forming around the bet was growing rapidly. Tourists pulled out their cell phones, street musicians stopped to watch, and even some locals approached, drawn by the dramatic energy of the situation. Tyler fed off the attention, gesturing even more as he explained to anyone who would listen how he was about to teach the beggar a lesson. "Asturias is impossible to play without years of conservatory training," Tyler said loudly enough for the whole street to hear. "My dad paid $80,000 in private lessons so I could play half of this piece right. And I started when I was 6 years old." William adjusted the position of his guitar, his fingers discreetly testing the tension of the strings. The instrument was visibly battered, chipped varnish, a crack in the top, strings that clearly needed to be replaced months ago. But there was something about the way he held it that made some of the musicians present exchange puzzled glances. "You know what amuses me the most?" Tyler continued, moving even closer. "You people always think that music is just feeling and soul. But real classical music is pure technique, discipline, formal education. Things you buy, not improvise on the street." The phrase hit William like a physical slap. 3 years ago, he was Dr. William Carter, full professor of music performance at Tulane University, with 2 master's degrees and a doctorate in classical music. His specialty? Baroque and Renaissance guitar, with a particular focus on the work of Spanish composers such as Albanese. He had devoted 20 years of his life to that university, building one of the most respected classical guitar programs in the southern United States. His students won international competitions. His recordings of Albanese were academic references. He was exactly the kind of person Tyler said real music required. Until the night it all fell apart. "Well," William said calmly, "let's see if feeling and soul are enough." Tyler laughed loudly, turning to his friends. "Did you hear that? He really thinks he can do it." He took out his cell phone and started recording. "Guys, you won't believe what I'm about to witness. A beggar thinks he can play professional classical music." What Tyler didn't know was that William had lost his academic career not because of incompetence, but because he refused to accept bribes from wealthy parents trying to buy approvals for their mediocre children. A forged anonymous complaint about inappropriate behavior with female students was enough to destroy 2 decades of reputation in a matter of weeks. Without the resources to defend himself adequately in court against expensive lawyers, William lost not only his job, but his home, his savings, and even contact with his own daughter, who was convinced by his ex-wife that the accusations were true. "I bet you can't even tune that guitar right," Tyler sneered, moving even closer. "How about we up the ante? If you fail, and you will, in addition to getting out of this corner, you pay me $500 for my 10 minutes wasted here." William's neck muscles tensed slightly, but his voice remained calm. "What if I can play the entire piece without mistakes?" "Impossible," Tyler said immediately. "But if you do, which you won't, in addition to the Tesla, I'll post on my social media that I was wrong about you." Tyler had 200,000 followers on Instagram and TikTok, where he often posted videos of his luxurious life and opinions about who deserved success in life. A public apology from him would be seen by hundreds of thousands of people. William looked at the Tesla keys Tyler was waving provocatively, then at the recording cell phone, and finally at the growing crowd of spectators. For the first time in 3 years, he didn't just see another day trying to survive on the streets. He saw an opportunity. "I accept," said William, his fingers instinctively finding the starting position of Albany's piece. What Tyler couldn't see, mesmerized by his own arrogance, was that every cruel word that came out of his mouth was awakening something in William that had remained dormant for a long time. Not just his musical abilities, but a determination that 3 years of injustice had transformed into something far more dangerous than mere talent. Because sometimes, when you lose absolutely everything, you discover you have nothing left to lose, and people with nothing to lose are the most dangerous of all, especially when they possess skills the world has tried to make you forget you had. William positioned the battered guitar on his lap, his fingers instinctively finding the positions he had mastered during 2 decades of academic career. The first chord of Asturias echoed through Bourbon Street with a clarity that made several conversations stop abruptly. The sound shouldn't have come out so clean from that visibly damaged instrument, but each note resonated with a precision that made nearby street musicians look at each other in surprise. Tyler, who had expected to hear an amateurish, out-of-tune sound, felt a twinge of discomfort for the first time. "Wait a minute," Tyler said, interrupting after only 8 bars. "That guitar has been modified in some way. No one gets that sound out of an instrument this old." William stopped playing, looking up calmly. "Would you like to examine the instrument?" Tyler approached and inspected the guitar roughly, turning it from side to side, looking for any signs of hidden electronic equipment or modifications. He found only worn wood, rusty strings, and scars from years of heavy use. "There must be some trick," Tyler muttered, reluctantly returning the instrument. "Continue. But I want to see you play the fast part without missing a single note." It was then that a familiar voice cut through the tension in the air. "William? William Carter." A black man in his 50s, elegantly dressed, approached the crowd. It was Professor Marcus Thompson, current director of the music department at Loyola University and William's former colleague in the golden days of his academic career. "Marcus," said William, a small smile touching his lips for the first time. "I didn't expect to see you here. I was leaving a meeting downtown when I heard classical music coming from the street," explained Marcus, his eyes quickly assessing the situation. "I had to come see who was playing Albany's with such technique." Tyler immediately joined the conversation. "Oh, you two know each other? Perfect. You can witness your friend's miserable failure." Marcus looked at Tyler with a kind of gaze reserved for particularly arrogant students. "And you are?" "Tyler Blackstone. My father owns Blackstone Music, the largest chain of instrument stores in the South. And I'm about to prove that this guy is nothing but a fraud." The name Blackstone made Marcus frown. The company was known in academic circles for questionable practices, including attempts to influence university curricula to favor its lower-quality products. "Interesting," Marcus said slowly. "William, may I ask what piece you're playing?" "Asturias, complete version," William replied. Young Mr. Blackstone chose it himself. Marcus couldn't hide a smile. If there was one piece that William mastered absolutely masterfully, it was this one. He had seen William play Asturias in recitals that left entire audiences in tears. "Tyler," Marcus said, turning to the young man, "Do you have any idea who you're challenging?" "A beggar who thinks he can play classical music," Tyler replied dismissively. "And frankly, I don't care if you're friends. A bet is a bet." Marcus chuckled softly. "A bet? What kind of bet?" "If he can play without mistakes, he wins my Tesla," said Tyler, pointing to the red car. "When he fails, he never shows up on this corner again to bother good people." "And you will post a public apology on your social media," William calmly reminded him. Tyler rolled his eyes. Sure. As if that's going to happen." Marcus looked from William to Tyler, processing the situation. Then, to everyone's surprise, he took out his cell phone and started recording. Tyler Blackstone, son of the owner of Blackstone Music, betting a Tesla against a homeless black man. "This will be interesting to document." "What are you doing?" Tyler asked, suddenly nervous. "Recording a historic moment," Marcus replied calmly. "Go on, William. Show this young man what 3 decades of study really mean." Marcus's presence completely changed the dynamics of the situation. It was no longer just a homeless man being humiliated by a rich kid. It was a clash between real knowledge and privileged arrogance, and now there was a respected witness documenting it all. William adjusted the position of his guitar again, but this time there was something different about his posture. The shame and resignation of the past 3 years were being replaced by the quiet confidence that had once made him one of the most respected guitarists in the South. "Marcus," William said quietly, "do you remember the tremolo technique we developed for this particular passage?" "The Carter technique," Marcus replied with a nostalgic smile. "It revolutionized the way this piece is taught at least 6 universities." Tyler watched the exchange between the two men with growing unease. There was technical language being used that was completely beyond his comprehension, and for the first time since the bet began, he wondered if he had seriously underestimated his opponent. "Well," said William, positioning his fingers on the strings, "let's see if I still remember." What Tyler didn't know was that he was about to witness not just a musical performance, but the artistic resurrection of a man who had been forced to bury his identity for 3 long years. William wasn't just preparing to play a difficult piece, he was preparing to reclaim who he really was. As the first complex chords of Asturias began to flow with a technique that made Marcus nod his head in admiring approval, Tyler realized with growing horror that he might have just bet against someone far beyond his ability to comprehend, let alone beat. The opening chords of Asturias flowed from the battered guitar with a perfection that instantly drowned out the noise of Bourbon Street. William wasn't just playing the piece, he was redefining how it should sound, each crystalline note cutting through the hot New Orleans air like a sharp blade of pure mastery. Tyler felt the blood drain from his face when he realized that the first 8 bars were already technically perfect. This was not the hesitant performance of an amateur, but the fluid and expressive interpretation of someone who had mastered not only the notes, but the soul of the composition. "That's impossible," Tyler muttered, but Marcus quickly silenced him with a gesture, without stopping the recording. The tremolo technique William had developed years ago, the famous Carter technique, transformed the most challenging section of the piece into a cascade of notes that seemed impossible to produce from a single instrument. His fingers danced across the strings with a speed and precision that left several musicians in the audience gaping in shock. "My God," whispered a tourist who stopped to watch. "He's playing 3 different melodies at the same time." Tyler desperately tried to find some mistake, some imperfection he could use to invalidate the performance, but each passage was executed with a clarity that bordered on the supernatural. The worn guitar resonated like a Stradivarius, transformed by the hands of a true master. "Stop," Tyler said suddenly, his voice breaking. "Stop that now." William continued playing, not out of defiance, but because he was completely absorbed in the music. For the first time in 3 years, he was playing again as Dr. William Carter, full professor, not as the beggar on the streets. "I said stop," Tyler shouted, lunging toward William. Marcus immediately blocked his path. "Touch him and you'll have a lot more trouble than a lost bet, kid." It was at that moment that William reached the most technically impossible passage in the piece, a section of arpeggios at extreme speed that only the world's greatest virtuosos could perform. Not only did he play it flawlessly, he added improvised variations that demonstrated a complete mastery of the underlying harmony. The crowd was now substantial. People were recording with cell phones, street musicians had completely stopped their own performances to watch, and even police officers patrolling the area approached to see what was causing the gathering. "Tyler," Marcus said calmly, still recording, Do you have any idea who you've really challenged? I don't care who he was, Tyler replied, but his voice was shaking. This is some kind of scam. No one gets rich playing on the street if they have that kind of talent. You're right, Marcus said with a cold smile. No one stays on the street by choice when they have that level of skill. Dr. William Carter lost his chair at Tulane University 3 years ago due to a smear campaign orchestrated by wealthy parents who didn't want their mediocre children to fail. Tyler froze. Dr. Carter? The William Carter who wrote the classical guitar teaching method I used in college. The very same, Marcus confirmed. The man you are publicly humiliating is one of the foremost authorities on classical music in the Southern Hemisphere. His teaching methods are used in over 50 universities. The realization hit Tyler like a punch in the stomach. He had challenged not just any street musician, but one of the masters of American classical music. And worse, he was being recorded doing it. William reached the final climax of the piece, where Albanese requires the guitarist to simultaneously play a high melody, a middle harmony, and a continuous bass line. The technique is so complex that most conservatories don't even attempt to teach the full version. William not only played it perfectly, he played it with such emotional expressiveness that several people in the audience began to cry. Stop, said Tyler, his voice now a desperate whisper. Please stop. I take back the bet. William finally looked up, without stopping playing. A bet is a bet, Mr. Blackstone. Your words, not mine. When William played the final chord of Asturias, a full chord that reverberated through the air like musical thunder, the silence that followed lasted exactly 5 seconds before the street erupted in deafening applause. That was incredible, someone in the crowd shouted. I've never heard anything like that, shouted another. Tyler was pale, trembling slightly as he watched dozens of people throwing money into William's cardboard box. Even more troubling, at least 15 people were recording the entire situation, including Marcus, who clearly intended to use the footage. The keys, William said calmly, putting away his guitar. No, said Tyler, backing away. That was a trick. You lied about who you were. I never lied about anything, William replied serenely. You assumed. You saw a black man living on the street and assumed he was inferior to you. Your own words were any song and no excuses. Marcus approached Tyler, still recording. Tyler Blackstone, son of the owner of Blackstone Music, you just lost a public bet against one of the masters of classical music. Will you honor your word? You don't understand, Tyler said, his voice breaking. My father will kill me. That car, it's not even mine. It's the company's. You should have thought about that before betting something that wasn't yours, William said. But don't worry. I don't want your car. Tyler blinked, confused. You don't. No, William said, standing up and dusting off his pants. But I want 2 things. First, I want you to post a public apology on your social media, not to me, but to all the people you judge by their appearance. Second, I want your company to donate $50,000 to music programs in underserved communities. $50,000. Tyler almost shouted. The price of humility, William said calmly. Marcus has it all on tape. You can accept graciously, or I can sue you for racial discrimination documented on video. Your choice. The crowd murmured, clearly on William's side. Tyler looked around, seeing only hostile faces and recording cell phones. He was cornered, publicly humiliated, and completely out of options. Okay, Tyler whispered. Okay. I'll do what you asked. William nodded and turned to leave, but Marcus grabbed him by the arm. William, this isn't over. You need to get back into academia. Let me make some calls. Thanks, Marcus, William said with a small but genuine smile. But first, I need to play a few more songs. It's been 3 years since I felt the music flow like this. As William sat down again and began tuning his guitar for a new piece, Tyler stood still in the middle of the crowd, slowly realizing that he had just been destroyed not by force or wealth, but by the sheer excellence of someone he had tried to humiliate. True justice, William realized as he adjusted the strings, was not in destroying Tyler Blackstone. It was in reminding the world that greatness has no color, no address, and definitely cannot be bought or sold. 3 months after that day on Bourbon Street, William Carter's life had changed in ways he could never have imagined. The video of the performance, recorded by Marcus and dozens of spectators, went viral with over 15 million views across multiple platforms. The headline humiliated university professor lives on the street, but surprises arrogant heir with masterful performance, captured the world's attention. Tulane University, after 3 years of awkward silence, finally conducted a full investigation into the false accusations against William. The forged documents were exposed, and those truly responsible for the smear campaign, including wealthy parents who had bribed administrative staff, faced severe legal consequences. William was not only reinstated to his position, but promoted to director of the new Center for Musical Justice, an innovative program that offered free music education to underserved communities. His salary tripled, and he now had a $2 million budget to implement his teaching methods in public schools across the South. Dr. Carter, Dean Davidson said during the reopening ceremony, "We would like to formally apologize for the treatment you received. This university failed not only you, but our core values of justice and academic excellence." The main auditorium was packed with over 800 people, including students, faculty, journalists, and civil rights activists. When William took the stage to receive the keys to his new office, the ovation lasted over 5 minutes. Marcus Thompson, now his partner at the Center for Musical Justice, presented the impressive statistics for the first quarter: over 500 children enrolled, 15 teachers hired, and partnerships established with 12 public schools. William didn't just get his career back, Marcus said, he turned it into something much bigger. Meanwhile, Tyler Blackstone's life had taken a completely different turn. The viral video had turned him into a national symbol of privilege and prejudice. His social media accounts, once filled with praise from admirers, were now flooded with comments criticizing his arrogance. He lost more than 150,000 followers in 2 weeks. Tyler's father, initially furious at the promise of a $50,000 donation, changed his mind when he realized the negative impact on the company's image. Blackstone Music was losing important contracts, boycotted by communities that associated the brand with the heir's behavior. In a desperate attempt at damage control, the company ended up donating $200,000 to community music programs. "Tyler ruined our reputation in a single afternoon," Mr. Blackstone confessed to a public relations consultant. 20 years of building this company, and my son destroyed our credibility in 10 minutes. Tyler was required to take racial sensitivity and community service courses as part of a court settlement to avoid a discrimination lawsuit. 3 times a week, he volunteered at Williams Music Justice Center, cleaning instruments and organizing sheet music. "It's ironic," William remarked, watching Tyler carefully polish a classical guitar. "He's learning more about music now, working with real instruments, than he did in years of expensive lessons." The contrast between the two men couldn't be more stark. William now wore elegant suits and drove a BMW provided by the university, while Tyler had been forced to sell his Tesla to cover legal costs and had lost his luxury apartment. During one of the community service sessions, Tyler finally found the courage to approach William directly. "Dr. Carter," he said, his voice trembling slightly, I need to apologize." William stopped tuning a guitar and looked at Tyler. "For your words that day?" "For everything," Tyler replied, his eyes red. "For assuming you were inferior to me just because of your appearance. For trying to humiliate you publicly. For wasting my musical education while mocking yours." William nodded calmly. "Tyler, you've learned a lesson that many privileged people never learn. A person's true value isn't in what they have, but in what they can create, contribute, and overcome." The young man swallowed hard. "May I ask, how did you manage to keep playing after losing everything? 3 years on the streets, and yet you haven't lost your technique." "Music isn't found in expensive conservatories or perfect instruments," William explained. "It's here," he tapped his chest. "When you truly understand this, external circumstances become only temporary obstacles." 6 months after his viral performance on Bourbon Street, William received an invitation that completely symbolized his professional resurrection: a solo performance at Carnegie Hall in New York City at a benefit concert for urban music education programs. On the night of the concert, the theater was completely sold out. In the audience, in addition to music critics and celebrities, were hundreds of his former students, academic colleagues, and students from the Center for Musical Justice. Marcus was in the front row, recording every moment. When William appeared on stage, impeccable in a black tuxedo, carrying a perfectly crafted classical guitar, the ovation was immediate and thunderous. But the most exciting moment came when he announced his first song. "Tonight, I would like to start with Asturias by Albanese," William said into the microphone, a small smile touching his lips. "A piece that recently reminded me that true music transcends all the artificial barriers that society tries to build." The performance was transcendental. Critics from the New York Times and Washington Post described it as the most emotionally perfect performance of Albanese of the decade. The concert raised over $500,000 for community music programs. Backstage, after the final applause, William found an unexpected surprise. Tyler Blackstone was there, wearing the simple uniform of the event volunteers, helping to organize instruments. "Tyler," William said, genuinely surprised. "What are you doing here?" "I asked my community service supervisor to transfer me to this event," Tyler explained. "I wanted to see you play on a stage you deserve. And I wanted to thank you." "Thank you for teaching me that humility is not a weakness," Tyler said. "Over the past few months, working with real instruments, meeting children who study music despite all the difficulties, I finally understood what music really means." William extended his hand, and Tyler shook it respectfully. "Tyler, everyone deserves a second chance to learn who they really are." Today, 3 years after the incident on Bourbon Street, William Carter is nationally recognized as one of the most innovative music educators in the United States. His Center for Musical Justice has expanded to 15 cities, impacting more than 10,000 children annually. He has reconciled with his daughter, who now works as a legal assistant in his program. Tyler Blackstone completed his community service and decided to resume his music studies, this time with a completely different perspective. He now studies music education and works part-time at the center, not as punishment, but as a personal choice. The lesson that emerged from that confrontation on the street transcended music and prejudice. It became a story about how true excellence always finds its way, regardless of obstacles, and how even the most privileged can learn to recognize and respect greatness when it manifests itself in ways they did not expect. Because in the end, what really matters is not where you come from, but what you are capable of creating, contributing, and inspiring. William's music proved that true art knows no color, social class, or circumstances. It knows only the human soul in its purest and most powerful form. And if this story touched you, if it made you reflect on your own prejudices or on the power of second chances, leave a comment telling us where you're watching and subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove that justice, when served with intelligence and dignity, always finds its way to those who deserve it.